Really makes you realize how much we take for granted, doesn't it? I mean, we
Right.
can just open our mouths and words come out.
Right.
But the truth is, this effortless ability we have is the result of millions of years of evolution. It's incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the video jumps right into it with a bone I bet most people have never even heard of. The hyoid bone. It's in your neck.
Uh-huh.
And apparently, it's a crucial piece of the puzzle when it comes to figuring out how our ancestors started to speak.
It is. You see, the hyoid bone anchors your tongue muscles. And as you might imagine, having flexible and strong tongue muscles is pretty important if you want to shape all those intricate sounds that make up human speech.
Yeah. So it's not just about having a hyoid bone. It's about the shape of it, right? The video mentions something about comparing the hyoid bone in humans to those of other primates,
Yeah,
like chimpanzees.
that's right.
Okay.
When scientists analyzed the hyoid bone of Australopithecus afarensis,
Hmm.
the famous Lucy fossil.
Oh, yeah. Everyone's heard of Lucy.
Right. Well, Lucy's hyoid bone tells a fascinating story. It suggests that she had air sacs in her throat,
Okay.
much like chimpanzees do today.
Air sacs. What do those have to do with speaking?
Well, those air sacs might help make calls louder, which is great if you're trying to get someone's attention across a valley or something.
Hmm.
But for the kind of precise, nuanced sounds that we use in language,
Yeah.
those air sacs would have made things a lot more difficult.
Okay, so it sounds like poor Lucy probably wasn't reciting poetry.
Chuckles. Probably not. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Fast forward a couple of million years, and we get to Homo heidelbergensis, an ancestor who lived around 450,000 years ago. Now, their hyoid bones look remarkably similar to ours.
So no more air sacs, just like a clear path for all those sounds.
Exactly. It suggests that those air sacs were gone, which could have opened up a whole new world of possibilities when it came to making a wider range of sounds.
Wow.
And remember, all of this is happening before modern humans even show up on the scene.
Wow. So the hyoid bone is like this little bone with a big story to tell. It gives us a glimpse into how our ancestors might have sounded.
It does.
But the video also talks about something else, the vocal tract.
Right.
I guess that's pretty important too.
It's essential. Think of it like this. Your vocal tract is the pathway from your voice box to your mouth. And just like blowing into different instruments produces different notes, the shape of your vocal tract plays a huge role in the sounds you can make.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here. So how does our vocal tract differ from those of our ancestors or even other primates?
It's all about proportions. Humans have a fairly unique vocal tract in the sense that the horizontal part, basically your mouth, and the vertical part, the space above your voice box, are roughly the same length.
And why is that important?
Well, those proportions are what allow us to clearly produce those basic vowels,
Yeah.
A, I, and U. And those three little vowels,
Yeah.
they're considered fundamental building blocks for most languages because they're so easy for our ears to tell apart.
Huh. A, I, U. Who knew those sounds were so important? But I guess it makes sense, right? If your vocal tract had different proportions, say a shorter vertical part, you wouldn't be able to shape those sounds as easily.
Exactly. And for a while, scientists thought that Neanderthals might have had this limitation.
Oh, really?
Early reconstructions of their vocal tracts suggested they might not have been able to make that full range of vowel sounds.
Oh, really? So it's like imagining them speaking, and it sounds kind of mumbled.
A little bit. But here's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
More recent research, using sophisticated models and analysis, suggests that Neanderthals might have actually had similar vocal tract proportions to us after all.
Get out. So they could have been just as articulate as we are?
It's entirely possible. And this finding just goes to show how much we're still learning about our extinct relatives and how they might have communicated.
Right.
It really challenges those long-held assumptions about what makes us uniquely human.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's say our ancestors could make all these complex sounds with their fancy hyoid bones and well-proportioned vocal tracts.
Right?
But could they even hear them properly?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And that's where the evolution of the ear comes in.
Right.
Because what good is being able to make all these sounds if you can't even hear them?
All right. Right. It's like having a state-of-the-art speaker system hooked up to a radio from the Stone Age.
Exactly.
What's the point?
Right.
So how do we know what our ancestors could hear?
Well,
The video mentioned something about analyzing fossil skulls.
it's incredible what scientists can do these days.
I know, it's amazing.
By looking at the size and shape of the ear canal in those ancient skulls, and even examining the tiniest bones inside the ear,
Wow.
they can actually get a sense of what frequencies our ancestors were tuned into.
Hold on, frequencies. You're saying our ancestors' ears were like set to a different radio station than ours.
In a way, yes.
Okay.
You see, different sounds have different frequencies.
Right.
And what they found is that those early hominins, while they had some ear features similar to ours,
Mm-hmm.
were more sensitive to mid-range frequencies.
Okay, so what does that actually mean for understanding how they communicated? Like, were they walking around in a world where everything sounded muffled?
Not exactly muffled, but they wouldn't have picked up on the higher-pitched sounds in speech as easily.
Yeah, okay.
Those higher frequencies are really important for distinguishing between consonants, like the
Yeah.
difference between bat and pat.
Ah, so it's not just about speaking clearly, it's about hearing clearly too.
Right.
But what about those later Homo species, the ones we talked about earlier, like Homo heidelbergensis?
Right.
What did their ears look like?
Now, that's where it gets really exciting. When scientists examined the ear structures of those later species, including those from the Cima de los Huesos site in Spain, which has yielded a treasure trove of hominin fossils
Wow.
and even Neanderthals.
Yeah.
Guess what they found?
Let me guess, those guys had ears that were pretty close to ours.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Their ear structures were strikingly similar to those of modern humans, suggesting they could likely hear those all-important higher frequencies.
So not only could they potentially produce a wide range of sounds with those vocal tracts,
Yeah.
but they could also hear those subtle differences in those sounds. It's like all the pieces for complex communication were coming together.
Yeah.
But even with all this anatomical evidence from the hyoid bone, the vocal tract, and now the ears, can we definitively say when our ancestors started speaking like we do today?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And unfortunately, the answer is not yet.
Oh.
Unlike bones, speech doesn't fossilize.
Right.
We can't dig up an ancient conversation or eavesdrop on a Neanderthal campfire chat.
Yeah.
At least not yet.
Man, that would be incredible, though.
It would be amazing.
To hear those ancient voices and finally know for sure.
Yeah.
But even without a time machine, this deep dive has been eye-opening.
It really is.
Who knew you could learn so much about something like speech from fossils?
I know, right?
It seems like every bone has a story to tell.
Absolutely. It really highlights how much we can learn from the past, even without a written record.
Right.
And it just goes to show how interconnected different fields of study can be.
Right.
We're talking about paleoanthropology, evolutionary biology, acoustics. It's a real testament to the power of interdisciplinary research.
Totally. And it really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? All those millions of years of evolution, all those tiny changes adding up to this incredible ability we have to communicate, share ideas, tell stories. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
And here's something else to ponder.
Okay.
You know how the evolution of speech is often solely attributed to us Homo sapiens?
Yeah, like it's this thing that makes us special, sets us apart from all other animals.
Right. But when you look at this evidence, especially what we're learning about Neanderthals, it really calls that into question.
Okay.
If they had the capacity for complex communication,
Mm-hmm.
what does that say about them, about us? It really challenges our understanding of what makes us uniquely human.
You know, it's funny you mentioned Neanderthals because the video seemed to focus on them quite a bit.
Yeah.
They kept popping up in every segment, almost like they were trying to tell us something. But it wasn't just about their anatomy, right? Didn't the video also talk about some of their behaviors that hinted at a more complex culture?
Absolutely. Remember those details about Neanderthals caring for injured members of their group?
Right.
That's not just survival instinct. It suggests empathy, compassion, maybe even a way to communicate needs and offer support.
Right. And the whole thing about them using pigments and possibly even jewelry, that's hinting at something more than just practicality, right? It's like they had a sense of symbolism, maybe even art. And you don't get those things without some pretty complex thought processes going on behind the scenes.
Exactly. So when you combine that with what we're learning about their potential for complex vocal communication,
Right.
it really makes you wonder what their world was like. What were those conversations like? Did they tell stories? Share their knowledge of the land and the stars? We always talk about the mysteries of ancient Egypt or lost civilizations.
Yeah.
But Neanderthals were right here sharing this planet with us. What if their lost stories are just as fascinating, just waiting to be understood?
It's mind-boggling. And so frustrating in a way.
Yeah.
We're left with these tantalizing hints, but no way to go back and listen in. Like finding a record player with no needle. All that potential silent and out of reach.
Oh. Maybe not entirely out of reach. Think about it, just in the last few decades, our understanding of Neanderthals has been completely transformed.
Mm-hmm.
We've gone from thinking of them as these brutish cavemen
Yep.
to recognizing them as a separate human species with their own rich culture. Who knows what discoveries the future holds, what new techniques we'll develop to analyze those ancient bones, those artifacts, those hints they left behind.
You're right. What seemed impossible a few years ago might be just around the corner. Maybe someday we will find a way to hear those lost voices of the past, even if it's just an echo.
Wouldn't that be incredible?
Yeah,
But even if we never quite manage to decipher their language, the very fact that they might have had one fundamentally changes how we see ourselves and our place in the grand scheme of things. It challenges us to rethink that whole narrative of us versus them, of Homo sapiens as the pinnacle of evolution.
it's humbling, isn't it? We get so caught up in our own story, our own achievements, that we forget there were other humans here before us, other cultures, other ways of experiencing the world, and who knows what they could have taught us.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of studying the past, especially something as complex and fascinating as the evolution of language. It's not just about digging up old bones. It's about understanding who we are, where we come from, and what it truly means to be human.
Beautifully said. This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation for something I honestly took for granted. The simple act of talking, of listening, of sharing ideas. The next time I say hello to someone, I'm going to be thinking about that long journey that led to that very word, millions of years in the making.
As you should. And, it also makes you appreciate the work of the scientists who are piecing together this incredible story, one fossil one discovery at a time. They're like detectives of the past, using science to unveil mysteries that have been hidden for millennia.
Absolutely. So, to everyone listening, the next time you're chatting with a friend, telling a story, or even just humming a tune, remember you're tapping into something ancient, something extraordinary, something uniquely human. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there in the fossil record, there's an echo of that conversation waiting to be heard. Thanks for diving deep with us today.